Do you think, or
What?
their stuff? They're like set up for musicians.
Yeah,
So the sound
probably.
is probably really good.
Probably.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay, thank you. Hi,
So any,
welcome.
any thoughts before we start?
I have many thoughts. Any of them worth it? I don't know, Eric.
We'll come sit with her. This is my sister.
That
Oh.
thing we just heard indicates that it's now viewable on Facebook. So anything you say now will be broadcast to the world.
Oh, okay.
And yeah,
So
we don't
starts.
need a lot of amplification for y'all, right? We don't want to overwhelm her voice with the speaker. So let me know if I should even bring it down. There's water here, help yourself. There are books here. I don't really have any books at the register except your copy. So can't buy the one at the register, but there's a dozen books left here. All right.
Right.
Any idea about how long the general thing is, together with
An
ending
an hour-ish, depending how many questions
yeah,
people
it can go
have.
longer.
Yeah, an hour and a half. Yeah.
Okay. I won't do any introduction because I'm not well enough versed to do it. Anybody want to do an introduction?
Rachel, did you want to do an
Rachel, which one's
introduction?
Yeah, you want to do the introduction? Is the time? Does anybody have the time?
Yes, I have it right here. I have 6:57.
Well, it's premature then to do the introduction.
Introduction.
Why
So
don't
you have
you
3
wait-
minutes to prepare.
Wait until,
Rachel.
wait
Quick in your
until.
bio.
And you might want to sort of stand there, Rachel, when you make the introduction over there, so that Mike will pick you up for the stream.
Okay.
Because it won't pick you up out here. You could go from the back.
Or I can move and she
No,
can sit.
it's-
No.
I'll show you
No.
where to go. You can go there now.
Just follow him.
To the back office.
Backstage.
Figure eight pal. So yeah, if you just stand at her right shoulder and make the introduction.
Could
But we'll
scoot
do
in.
that right on time in case people come in.
Great.
But now they are
We know
able
we vacated
to
your front row.
They can tune in now? Okay. I don't know. I sent an email. Nobody has replied, I don't think.
get to it simply from our
Yeah.
website. It's also on our website, but where it really is in YouTube. And did you want the disco ball going during your talk?
No.
Aw, I'm sorely
Maybe at the end.
disappointed.
Maybe when we get into singing and dancing.
Oh, okay.
Disco ball during it.
Oh, you think so?
All right.
We'll get another chance.
That's true. Is it easy to turn on from the back, or Eric? Eric,
I was kidding.
is a disco ball easy to turn on from the back, or?
It's actually, I don't think it's.
Oh, you are just leading us on. Well, Rachel's tall enough; she might be able to at least.
Spin it.
I'll get my phone light on it.
Oh, Deb, did you want this?
Are we at 7?
Oh yeah, I do want your phone to take better pictures.
Not quite yet. One more minute. And by the way,
They can
questions.
hear you, they can see you.
Okay, questions online will come through the text, so you might want to look at it occasionally for that. Thank you. All right.
They will be able to comment both on YouTube and Facebook, so if anybody else has one of you could be looking at Facebook and one of you could be looking at YouTube.
I'll do that.
Okay, I have no idea what was said, but I'll let you do it. Yeah.
Somebody could comment on Facebook or YouTube to ask questions, so I just
Okay.
need to open the stream.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
It's kind of cool. Great. All right. Are we at
I think we're at 7. Yes.
I think we are basically at 7, you know, various clocks say various things, both of mine say, so it's not quite, all three of my clocks say it's 6:59.
Oh, one more minute.
It just says-
You must have some Zen in you.
I guess that's it. We're just
Start on time.
They're all amazingly synchronized. Okay, I think it is now actually 7 o'clock, so go ahead and get rolling.
Okay. Welcome. Thank everyone for coming tonight. I mostly wanted to come up here to thank Reverend Lien for writing this wonderful book that I know everyone here has enjoyed. And I really wanted to thank Eric for hosting us, and thank you so much for Bert and Beckett for having us here tonight. And I wanted to thank Barbara for making the introduction to us and Eric so that we can all join in San Francisco. And I have nothing else to say. I think that everyone here is just very grateful for our friend and mentor and teacher, Reverend Lien, and looking forward to our Q&A. And for anyone who has joined through the Bird and Beckett website, please post your questions and I will read them aloud.
Right, thank you. Thank you, Rachel. Yes, most definitely. Thank you, Rachel and Barbara, for setting this up. And I want to echo the thank to Eric and Bird and Beckett. I know this is I heard Eric is famous, so, you know, maybe some of that will rub off. And I think on us all, since we're here. So, yeah. Since this is a venue that is mostly promotes music, I thought we would do a little Buddhist song, which you all know, by the way, and that is "Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream, merrily, merrily, life is but a dream." Okay, that was too easy. So now we're gonna do it as rounds. So let's see. Let's do it by rows. So there. Would you four like to be one row here? You four, one row. Oh no, there's plenty. How you two, Bruce and Barbara, can decide which row they want to be. Unless you want to be your own row. Is that? No.
We'll be with the first row.
Okay. So be 3 rows. Okay. This group here, then the next to last, and then the last. Is that clear? In the last. Okay. All right. So. Do people remember when to come? I know y'all know it. So go ahead. Ready? Front row.
Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 life is but a stream. Merrily, 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 your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, merrily, merrily,
Singing it 3 times.
life is but a stream. Merrily, merrily, row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream.
All right. Okay. That was a Grammy award for sure. Yeah, Eric, probably the best you've ever had here. Okay. All right. He enjoyed it too. All right. So having said that, I did want this tonight to be really an interaction between you all and questions about the book or anything around it. So I could start with that. Do people bring questions? Okay, Rachel has a question. Well, you raised your hand, right?
Yeah, I have
Okay,
brought
okay, you have a question.
Yeah.
All right.
Are we starting with my question?
Yeah, sure.
I folded over a page where you spoke about your teacher facing a riot cop in protest and realizing shared humanity. And then it brought me to a question about when, you know, there, in reading the book, there was so much about kind of not having to do anything, which I found really insightful for me personally. Just it can be experience and understanding. And then with that, I wanted to ask when you transfer over into doing, especially as it results to a personal experience.
All right. So, Eric, was that good enough, or do I need to repeat it? Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. So so that was in chapter on not knowing. Am I correct?
Skillful
Or non-duality.
Skillful effort.
Skillful effort. Perfect place. So essentially, and I think this is a good question for what's happening now in the Middle East, right? So when there's conflict or when there's difficulties, our tendency is to try to find, we like to land in the simplicity, or we like to think the simplicity of right and wrong, good and bad, the dichotomy or the binary or the duality. And the teaching is that it's not that it's wrong or bad to have duality, because salt and pepper works really good on food. And at times, knowing what is right and wrong is really important. And so it isn't so much that duality itself is a problem or even binary. It's when do we hold that tightly and we're not able to open up to what might be, where there is connection, where there isn't duality. So that in that story, Blanche, so for people who don't remember or don't know the story, Blanche was my teacher. She was Jewish American, and she was protesting the Vietnam War, and so she was on on the line, picket line, and the police was, people were yelling at each other from both sides. And then she had a moment in which she really, actually, why don't I read it? Do you have the page number? Skillful Effort. It's chapter 5. I probably could. 102. All right. Since it is the book, I apologize. I will read it. By the way, it's under skillful effort and it's under aversion and ill will, one of the 5 hindrances. So I'll start from there. With identification or selfing, or actually maybe I'll just say a little more. So in skillful effort, we're framed that our activity, the Buddha classically put as wholesome or unwholesome. So there are actually 4 ways to work with it, with how to work with effort, but they're broken into what is the the unwholesome first, and then the wholesome. So the acronym for that I put together, based on the typical way of putting it, is PACE, P-A-C-E. So with unwholesome, which is the classic wording, I like to say unskillful or not useful. One with around unskillful, you want to prevent it from arising. Then, if it has arisen, then you want to abandon it. P-A. A is abandoned. Now, when there is skillful, and when you don't have skillful, you want to cultivate it. That's the C. And then when there is skillful, you want to extend it. So 4, then 2 grouping. And notice that it's the unwholesome or unskillful first. I like to think of it as preventative kind of, teaching then. So it helps us to frame. So one way to answer your question is you can reflect before you act. That's where the not doing is. It just gives us a moment to pause and really reflect before we react. So again, most of Buddhism in terms of a practice is to have awareness of what you're thinking and behaving and how you live your life, right? Skillful speech, skillful action, and skillful livelihood, and the ethical conduct, or I like to say compassionate conduct part. So you pause and you say, is what I want to do towards wholesome or unwholesome? If it's leaning towards unwholesome, how can I prevent it to even arise? And then when it is, how do I abandon it? If I reflect and think, this would be wholesome or skillful, how can I cultivate ways? Perhaps it's accessing information that enlivens. Like I think right now, with all that's going on in the Middle East, we can get really charged up with the information. And at some point you could say, when does it fall into the unskillful, right? Of a lot of information, or information that actually brings me down into hopelessness, or really riles me up to do things and say things about people that I other people, or that I speak hate speech, right? And so then we want to abandon that, or what are ways in which we can cultivate continuing or access wholesome. Okay, so that's the framework. So one way to talk about it, so the book is, while it is about anti-oppression in general, it is more focus on anti-racism, or working with the oppression of racism and white supremacy culture. So I talk about how, besides the pace, how the 5 hindrances, which are teachings in Buddhism about emotional and mental states that we all have, and they are taught as a grouping, so that Buddha really had groupings of ways of teaching things. So this is one grouping. You could hear about the fetters as another grouping. So these are considered chronic, for the most part, unskillful qualities of heart and mind that classically an effort is to keep us away from attaining concentration. Because in concentration, the result of concentration is actually ease and a sense of pleasure. And it's actually considered, the jhana states are considered the replacement for worldly pleasure. So notice in Buddhism, skillful effort is in the meditative quality. So how do we use our effort to access mindfulness, skillful mindfulness, and skillful concentration? So the 5 hindrances are sensual desire, which includes sexual desire, aversion and ill will, sloth and torpor, or restlessness and anxiety, and skeptical doubt. So this is under aversion and ill will. And I had put sense desire, or I'd discuss it more as a sense of selfing, the pleasure we get from thinking we're a certain kind of person and solidifying around that. Because it is taught in Buddhism that with sense desire, and notice in Buddhism we have 6 senses: eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. And so as a being, we are sense driven. So the thing though is that when we're sense contact is made, then usually a sense of self comes up, right? So for instance, around racism, we're all very much attached to how we are perceived as a being, right, in the system of racism. Okay? All right. Long framing for the section here. Aversion and ill will. With identification or selfing, blaming and shaming often also co-arise. The second hindrance is aversion and ill will, known as hatred in some lists. The energy in the water metaphor is that of boiling. I used to live where there was a hot spring. It was lovely to feel its heat, but if you got too close to the water source, you could get burned. Or, if you stayed in the hot water too long, you would get heat exhaustion. This again points us towards how if we're careless with the hindrances, then harm can happen. The arising of feelings and thoughts of harm is something humans do. What we do with it is the key. Seeing clearly through strong, difficult states provides us the pause and the agency to act in non-harming ways. Aversion, ill will, and hatred are pretty obvious as part of white supremacy culture and racism. But what about righteousness? As an activist and a fighter for social justice, I've had a lot of righteous anger. My root teacher, Zenke Blanche Hartman, tells a story in her book, Seeds for a Boundless Life, about a life-changing moment when she was able to recognize her righteous anger. She was an activist all her life, so participating in marches and rallies was very common to her. Her father was a civil rights lawyer in Alabama or Arkansas. I think she grew up in Alabama, I'm pretty sure. And then they had a cross burned on their lawn because he did civil rights law. So she understood it. During an anti-Vietnam War rally, she found herself face to face with a riot cop and recognized a way to understand their shared humanity. The policeman was trying to protect what he thought was right and good from all the other people who were trying to destroy it. and I was doing the same. This is Blanche speaking, or writing. Since I had no basis for understanding the experience of shared identity with someone whom I had considered completely other, I began to search for someone who would understand it. That's how I came to be an ordained monastic. What qualities do we want our anti-racist work to have? Hatred and righteousness. That can be a lot of blaming and shaming. The movement of aversion is to push away. Certainly, our healing from racism and anti-racist work is about pointing out or acting in ways to move toward or resolve something or someone being harmful. But can we do it in ways that do not perpetuate hatred? What is the energy that is in service of us not othering others just because they other us? Are we going to do that to them? Can there be a sense of conviction that doesn't include aversion, ill will, and hatred? Instead, can it be from unconditional friendliness? Are we behaving or speaking in ways that are inclusive? The practice to overcome aversion and ill will is to cultivate connection. Does that answer your question, or you want a little more specifically? All right. So actually, this is a good time for a practice pause right here, a little meditative practice. All right. So let's take a moment where you just, if it's useful for you, to close your eyes or in some way bring your attention inward. There's a little visualization reflection. It's called mindful reflecting on diffusing othering. So just come into yourself and your sense of the groundedness of your being. Feel free to move around or find a way that gives you the bodily sense of settledness also. Now imagine yourself across from someone whom you're having difficulties with. Perhaps someone who believes differently from you in the current conflict in the Middle East even. But do choose a relatively, quote unquote, easy difficulty. This exercise is to build skillfulness, not to get through anything or to fix yourself or the other person. All right, as you're visualizing this person, what is a mildly strong emotion you're experiencing when you think of this? Not the thought, but the emotion. Is it frustration? Is it anxiety? Is it hatred? Now bring your attention to a body location. What's one sensation you're experiencing that's difficult to be with? I know that sometimes when I have anger, when I pay attention, I'm gritting my teeth, and so my jaws are tight. How can you attend to that sensation to ease it? My jaw, perhaps opening the jaw just a bit, perhaps rubbing it with my hands. Go ahead and attend to that sensation. Let yourself do it. Or perhaps deep breath, perhaps dropping the shoulders, or opening a fist. Now imagine really looking at the person. Now imagine if they're doing the same exercise. What might they discover? What might be similarities in both your experiences? When you're ready, open your eyes. Does anyone want to share what came up for you? Anyone online, Rachel? Sure. Ellen. Phoebe.
I pictured someone who was recently,
I'm sorry, could you talk just a
I've
little
been
louder?
going to school with this kid for like 2 years, but, I don't really, like, know them. And I had an incident recently where they assaulted me. I got pushed into the cement, and, I've been hesitant to interact with them. So that exercise was really helpful for me because I was able to, like, see them as a human, you know?
See them
As, like, a human. Before I just saw them as, like, just another kid. But I guess I didn't even, not didn't realize, but, like, didn't think about how their perspective of the situation was.
And what did you imagine?
I came
The
to terms with
similarity.
that we might not agree with on each other on everything.
You don't agree with each other. Yeah. And do you think they might, what was the similarity?
I realized that we were both going, like, we both have a conscious and a perspective on what happened and a perspective on, like, everyday interactions.
Everyday interaction, yeah. And may I ask what sensation you felt?
I felt my feet because my feet tighten up when I'm anxious.
You felt your feet? Because why?
They tighten up when I'm
Oh.
anxious.
And how did you attend to it then?
I tried to, like, just loosen them, I guess.
And do you think that helped then to relax the rest of your body?
Yes, it very much did.
I'm trying to pull up, there's a Dr. Seuss line that used to quote, wherever your feet goes, your mind will go also. Something like that. I can look it up when I get home and send to you. Yeah, so our body and our emotions and our thoughts are interrelated. I have noticed that I hold my fist tight often, and then just releasing it can help me to relax, be it from anxiety or anger at times. Anyone else want to share? Can you imagine in the Middle East now if everyone just paused and faced each other and really look for what is the commonality? What is it that we share together? Right? They share a homeland, right? How they got there, right, is really many, many generations of difficulties. And yet, they have to learn to live together. That's the thing, right? Just like we all have to learn to live together. not to say that there isn't time to call out that certain actions are not useful or skillful or are causing more harm than good, right? I think the other thing, right, that helps us to decide what to do, that's your question essentially. When do we move into doing? Is, are we living in accordance to our values, right? And the Eightfold Path is completely set up for that, right? So remember why there are 8 of them, which is, they're broken into 3 sections, and the first is wisdom. I was going to name them, but I'm going to name them in the 3 sections. So the first is the wisdom section, classically called the wisdom, and it's skillful view or skillful understanding. View and understanding is the same word, right? And that is, in Buddhism, the Four Noble Truths and karma, right? So the Four Noble Truths are essentially what causes harm, right? In life, there is things that cause harm and hurt. That's especially the engaged version. And then the second is what are the causes and conditions for the arising of harm? And then the third is that harm and harming doesn't have to happen. That's a classic. The engaged version of the Four Noble Truths in this book is that where do we find agency in the midst of hurt and harm? And then the last is classically the Eightfold Path, right? And so that's the, in the engaged version, we say, how are we empowered by studying and practicing the Eightfold Path? So the first Noble Truth brings you around again, basically, and then it's also about karma. So one way to understand karma is that what are the teachings we've been taught? And we really have to examine that because we are taught things that perhaps had good intention, but are they relevant now, right? And we actually, in that, we need to really understand, is that hurt and harm, while it might be historical, how are we taught to respond to that? Is it in a way that's appropriate now? And that's the hardest part. So karma is also essentially cause and effect. And actually, you can look at the Four Noble Truths as that. And on the chapter on the precepts, right, skillful enactment, if you look at the Four Noble Truths the way they lay out, you can think of them as effect and cause. Effect and cause. The effect is hurt and harm, or dukkha, or suffering. The causes are, so you're examining what are the causes, the origins, the conditions for that to arise. If you want the effect to be non-harming, or people have a sense of agency, right, both individually and collectively, then what are the conditions and causes for that, which is the fourth Noble Truth, which is skillful understanding of the Four Noble Truths and karma. Really, the Four Noble Truths is Buddhist sense of what is the values that we're holding. If we see things as harmful and not harmful, how do we frame our life to live in a way that reduces harm and cultivate non-harming or bring forth non-harming? So that's our values. And then karma shows us how it has come into being and the responsibility we have now to keep what going. Because there's also free will. A lot of time, I remember, when I first went to the monastery, we asked the teacher, is there free will? Because we are taught sometimes that karma is predetermined, but that's not true. And so it is about what is our responsibility. Karma essentially is a teaching on responsibility. If you're aware that what brings this about will condition what comes later, then you want to be really careful what you're going to do now to condition later, right? If I've been taught to be angry or to be harmful as a way to respond to injustice, right? That is one way. Is that the way I want to choose, or is it appropriate in this moment, right? Sometimes it's appropriate, right? I remember when I first worked at the domestic violence, the rape crisis center actually first, before I worked in the domestic violence shelters. I took a self-defense class, right, with some great lesbians who started actually self-defense in New York City, and this was in Oregon. And there was a moment in which, we're doing an exercise where the teacher has me pinned down, right? And she's like, fight back. And I was like, ah. And I just really felt that my conditioning was to be frozen. And it took a lot of will. And many of us as female body are conditioned to not respond with aggression. And yet, that's why we have to learn that aggression may be necessary in self-defense, and then how to skillfully do it. But it takes that mental shift that I'm worthy to defend myself with aggression if necessary. I know I was 17 and I was like, right? Sorry, I was 19 at that point. Still young, and it was a big moment. And so it's not that, sometimes parents might respond with what seem aggression to pull someone away, a child away from hurt and harm, So it's not the act itself on a certain level. It is about what is the motivation. So it isn't so much, here's the thing about the wisdom section too, right? Is that we also learn discernment. This is actually the way to learn wisdom in Buddhism. Not necessarily, it is a framing of what is skillful and what is not, or wholesome and not wholesome. It is about how do we discern in each moment, and the more complex the situation is, the more we actually are practicing discernment. So the other part about how to act or when to act is that takes discernment, and in discernment it also takes what? Failure, right? You have to be willing to mess up and then stay with that and find out and work together to find a way that is better, right? So I'm still on the Eightfold Path, right? So that's skillful view or understanding, and then the next is skillful thinking. Now, thinking in Buddhism is never passive. So translation I use, which is very common, you might have heard it as intention. I like to use motivation, because motivation implies you have a sense of value that motivates you, and it gives a sense that there's actually energetic force behind motivation, which is true, because how you think conditions you in Buddhism, right, into the next third, which is the ethical conduct, skillful speech, skillful action, and skillful livelihood, right? Now, the third is called the meditative, and that's skillful effort, as I said, skillful mindfulness and skillful concentration. And what's in the third section is actually, as Gil taught me, Gil Fronsdal, it's actually what's considered often the bridge between our values and how we behave. So the meditative factors are actually there not just to make us space out and go, light and shining, and I'm removed from life and doesn't matter, everything's just bright and beautiful, and I'm not, no causes and conditions here, right? That's not really what meditative qualities are. They're actually for helping us to discern. It's a time for discernment. This is like vipassana, not concentration, not shamatha. Shamatha, so two basic set of, sorry, I'm just going on here. One long answer. Is this okay, or should I stop? Okay. There are basically two kinds of meditative grouping. Shamatha, stopping, and calming, right? Because we're driven by karmic energy, right? And so we need to stop or pause, if you can't stop, to really and settle and ground ourselves. So concentration helps to really ground us. Right? So the meditative factor does include that. And then it actually helps us then, vipassana, the second method grouping of method of meditation. V means steady or direct, clear, steady, onto seeing. Passana means seeing. So it's vipassana. So that's why it's translated insight. And so it's that actually insight is the hardest. When you went to a Goenka retreat, they don't let you leave because on the 6th and 7th day, they start to actually give you vipassana. And vipassana, actually, because you're investigating, right? It actually is considered, I like to think of it as like, a oyster when sand gets in, and then it rubs and rubs, and then it becomes a pearl. That's vipassana. It actually should be activating, and that's why that's when you want to get up and say, "Fuck it, I'm not doing this anymore. Now it's hard. It's no calmness anymore. That's what I came for." But really, the point of meditation is for us to investigate so that we become clearer and clearer in our discernment. Am I living according to my value, or my actions of speech, body, and mind in accordance to my value, or am I putting my value into my action? So that's why it's considered the bridge between the two. Okay. So that also helps us. So if we pause and say, what I want to do in response to X situation, is it in accordance with my values? And then also, what are the behaviors? What are the thinking and behaviors and ways of living that would enact that? All right. There's a answer. Hopefully, yes.
Not a tangent. Not a
Well, tangent, but not. Deb's used to it. She's like, sometimes you just go, and I'm not sure, and then you bring it around. Did I bring it around? I hope I brought it around.
Yes.
All right. Any other questions? Yes. Remind me your name. I'm so bad with names. Kevin. Thank you, Kevin.
I'm curious about karma because my recent understanding is things that we thought, said, did in the past go out into the world with our signature on them, manifest in different ways, and that can have either instant effects.
Can have what?
Can have effects in that moment that are short term, but others take a lot more time to manifest.
Sure.
And recently I've been dealing with one of those long-term manifestations of something which happened long time ago in the past.
Sure.
And then having to make peace with it, not just for myself, but also to make peace with other people impacted. And I struggle with how to do that.
Uh-huh. So what's the question?
Do you have any thoughts on how you deal with, and it comes between other people, right? And so how to deal with other people who also struggle with the consequences or that have been affected by your karma.
Mm-hmm. So I think the danger of karma is that we think we know that this is the result of the past, right? Or the more specific we think we know, the more danger we get into, because there's so many causes and conditions. So one way to work with it is to ask questions. So it also comes with restoration, right, which is essentially what this book is about. So restoration isn't just about acknowledging what is, right? What is the difficult, what is the result of past actions. It's also, as I put it here, in that I see it as 3 essential ways, and really, it does make sense, right? 3 essential aspects of healing from trauma, in this case, of racism, but it is all, you could say, how to work with. By the way, karma is ripening every moment, right? It's already, right now is ripening. That's why we say, the way-seeking mind talks, folks. How do we come to the way? It's just one moment in which we see what is the ripening of the way, right? Or karma. So one is to acknowledge what is, right? To say, oh, this is, and it sounds like you had an understanding of the result, right? Next is acknowledging what shifts are especially needed. And then the third is learning how to put those shifts into practice. Now, yes, you could buy such a book or some other methodology of how to deal with knowing what shifts are especially needed. There are 8 of them here, right? The other thing is that I think when it comes to conflict is that the part that's the hardest is to ask those who have been affected what it is that they need. And this is the hard part of restoration. Most of us want a methodology or want some steps to go through, and yet it's about the interaction to say, how do you think we can heal this together? What can I do? What can we do? What is needed? So I think this is, restoration has to have a sense of identifying the conflict and then together working to figure out what is the way to address that. So does that answer your question? Yeah. And and that's hard because, especially if I've been the cause of harm, it's going to be hard to really be that vulnerable to not just say I'm sorry, but how can I do better about this? What is needed, and how can I do better about this? But the thing is, you don't just take it just because, let's say, you've hurt someone, and so they, you want to be open to receive, and that's also the hard part. So part of it is our working on our own self, blaming or shame about what we've done. The other thing, is that we also make up stories and then we keep looking. That's part of thinking, right? That we keep on adding to what we think the story is. And this is why talking it through and asking questions makes all the difference, because sometimes when you do go talk to that person or group of people, you realize that their framing isn't necessarily your framing. And that also then opens up what is it that's needed from their side, right? And then you can negotiate that. That's the part too. Sometimes and again, it's that duality. We think, oh, shit, I've hurt someone, so now I better just, bow down and do whatever. But it really is about knowing our capacity and also knowing that we're human and maybe we also need time. That's the other thing that I think we forget about restoration. It takes time. It takes effort. It does take support, and it takes time. So if we remember the bigger picture, again, karma is about the bigger picture, then we make room for more, as opposed to we want to go find a specific resolution. Is that helpful? Or yes. Okay. Okay, we got quarter till. Do you have a question online? Is anyone online, for that matter?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay.
I guess see the Facebook one because I don't have a Facebook account, but Ellen's on the YouTube. Send notes.
Anyone text me? Joanne, are you online? Do you have a question? Joanne comes to many of these, which I really appreciate. Some people are going, don't call me, don't call me. It is a Zen thing, you know, for the teacher to say, what about you? What about you? What do I want to say then? How about this? So I one part of the book is the whole net of Indra, right? So remember that classically the net of Indra from the Avatamsaka Sutra is that it talks about how reality is like a net, and at the crossing of the strands of the net are nodes, and in each of those nodes there's a jewel. And so jewels, because of their nature, reflect, and therefore we all reflect each other. So in here I ask us to think about more, not to exclude the net, because that's, not to exclude the jewels, because that's essentially each of us, and to pay attention to the net, right? And how perhaps certain of us, because of privileges, perhaps is become bigger and bigger and push out others and make it hard for them to shine, or we put a lot of weight on the net, or how are we conditioned not to take care of certain sections of the net. Now, there's also, of course, how is it that certain section of the net is very tangled, right? And, our repentance, we always say in Zen, right? All my ancient twisted karma from beginningless greed, hate, and delusion, born through body, speech, and mind, I now fully avow. Right? So we admit to it. That's avowing, right? We take responsibility for our karma, and yet it's ancient and twisted. And all our karmas are ancient and twisted. On one level, we're practicing to see the twistedness as part of our life. And not that it's a bad thing. It's just no one, however much privilege you have, doesn't have twisted ancient karma, because, eons, right? How we come here is eons and eons and eons. So, you want to examine the net. So I do end in skillful living with tending to the net. Skillful living is the last in this book, it's the last of the Eightfold Path, because I put the meditative factors in. At this point in the book, I hope you too have been able to use the wisdom and the tools from the Engage Four Noble Truths and the Engage Eightfold Path. While individual healing is important and necessary step, given how it's emphasized in North American dominant culture generally, and within white dominant convert Buddhist spaces in particular, this book has emphasized the structural and systemic conditions of white supremacy culture and its effects on practitioners of Asian heritage in particular, and on all practitioners interested in incorporating anti-racist and social justice into their practice. In this book, we have focused on the net of Indra, the whole net, not just the jewels, as a way to see the strands as the systems and structures that can provide a sense of wholeness of the net as strong, solid, mutual connections between and among jewels. We have also seen how, when the strands are not attended to, consciously by systems of oppressions such as racism, or unconsciously by individuals and communities conditioned by those systems, not only is the net not healthy, but the jewels are also harmed. Come on in. Have a seat. Welcome. Your hair has gotten longer, and I'm trying to pull up. It starts with an E. Emma? Yeah. Yeah, welcome. Gosh, in person. Hi. At this time, we want to consider ways we can think of the net as complete. While we have concentrated on the strands due to individual focus conditioning, we also want to remember that the jewels are part of the net. Net and jewels are together. They are not mutually exclusive. Liberation is to wake up to how we've been unconscious. This begins with fully acknowledging where there are breaks in the system or within ourselves. The Engaged Four Noble Truths support us to see how wholeness may not have been known because we haven't opened ourselves up to seeing it. We can have a larger view by examining how we were conditioned by our family, cultures, systems, and national and world history. There's a saying in Zen that delusion and enlightenment are intertwined. They are not separate. Recently, I had an experience that exemplified this for me very clearly. I was at the Russian River, where there's a lot of nature, including many spider webs on the railing of the back porch of the house where I was staying, Shinsen's house. In the spring, there are also many dandelion puffs on the lawn. The puffiness of these heads is from the white, fluffy tuft of hair on each dandelion seed, called a pappus. One day, as I looked out, there were so many of these papai floating in the air that it looked like it was snowing. It really did. These papai, I believe that's how I pronounce. These papai were getting caught in the webs on the back porch. Because of the thinness of the strands of a spider web, sometimes it can be hard to see the web itself unless you look at it from the right angle or the light is just right. However, because of the snow, the webs on the back porch were easily visible. I didn't have to search for them. It was very obvious that they were there. A spider web is often used as a representation of the net of Indra. Dandelions are considered a weed, and so are often thought of as bad or not wanted. We often are taught the same about dukkha, our pain and suffering, that they should not be, and therefore are to be gotten rid of when present. Many of us come to practice to get rid of pain and suffering, as opposed to examining how we can investigate the possible messages they signal. And yet, when conditions are appropriate and we are able to see a weed or dukkha in context, there can be healing in that moment. If we only see dukkha, such as hurt and harm of racism, as something to be gotten rid of, then we miss the opportunity to see how, when we can be with and investigate dukkha, it can be a means to healing and restoration. As stated before, how much a hurt is experienced as a harm is dependent on how the hurt was or is held and processed. That's what determines whether something becomes traumatic or not for the most part. Dukkha, then, when framed in context that includes skillful means and appropriate support, such as is offered by the Engaged Four Noble Truths and its Eightfold Path factors, can be transformed into ways to let go or be released from the harm it has caused. This is a moment of healing and restoration. Such a moment is freedom from suffering and those old causes of suffering. The message offered to us by the Third Noble Truth. Hurt and harm, when viewed and practiced within contexts that are meaningful to us, can be the fodder for growth and transformation. Thus, what was a weed, a hurt that was not attended to previously, when held up in contexts that make sense to us now, can be the means that show us what was already here, the connections in life. The peppy, in the transformational newness of spring, helps us to see the net, or wholeness, easily. Dogen, the founder of Soto Zen in Japan, wrote that those who think they're enlightened are deluded, and those who know they are deluded are enlightened. When we see our delusions, that is the moment of enlightenment. We are deluded if we think and act not with the wholeness of the net in mind. We are not isolated beings. We wake up to the knowing that being supported and supporting are interconnected. Living centered by our values, such as the interbeing contract, or the 5 precepts, is a way we can know that we are being supported, and in practicing them, that we support others. When we don't live with a centering set of values, it can result in dysfunction. When the resulting degree of dysfunction comes to a critical mass, it can actually show us that wholeness is already possible right here and now, if we're paying attention at such a moment. Additionally, if we're willing to work to rectify the dysfunctions, we can realize that as jewels, we're actually here being supported by and are ourselves the stewards of the net. Thank you. All right. Any last questions or comments? Yes, Paul.
Can I do a chant?
Yes.
Because I've heard it 40 times in the last 10 days. So.
Okay, a chant, sure.
So,
you want to lead us in it?
well, yeah, so it's a call and response, which I'm sure you know. It's Bhavatu Sarva Mangalam, which is may all beings be happy. So I'm going to chant it 3 times, and then everyone else replies Sadhu, 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 which is we agree. Or
We agree, yeah.
we agree. I don't know. It's just it's been ingrained in my head for so long.
Yes,
That,
that's what
but that's
retreats
it's a
would
good
do.
thing. May all beings be happy.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. Why don't you stand up and
Oh my gosh. Okay.
here
I
we go.
can't do it like yes. Okay. All right.
Do it any way you want, but I'm
Alright,
going to
I'll
do
do
this.
this.
Okay. And you want to turn so they can hear you? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Bhavatu Sabha Mangalam. Bhavatu Sabha Mangalam. Bhavatu Sabha Mangalam.
Sadhu. 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 Thank you. May all beings be happy. We agree. We agree. I like that. That's a good way to end. Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Eric. Let's give Emma a,
I'm already.
yeah,
I'm on it. It's in there.
because we do have a swag bag here provided by North Atlantic Books.
Do you want a picture?
Oh, yeah, can we have a group picture since it's sake? Okay.
With you.
No, with her down there.
Eric, can you come take a picture
Like the
for
first
us? Oh, yes, and you'll be in it too, Deb. There's so many pictures without Deb. Do you want to get a little closer?
Stuck in the bottom.
Shall we use your camera?
Yeah, this is her. Hers is nicer than I didn't bring my real camera, so we're just
Okay.
using her iPhone, which is nicer than my iPhone.
Do we want to turn it the other
And
way?
if you
Are you all,
want
you
to
all
use
need to
the
go up
it'll most
there?
likely be for social media on Instagram.
Sure.
All right, everyone okay? Emma, you want to move in or not? You don't
Yeah,
have to.
why don't you come as close
Like
as you
said,
can?
you can pass. And yeah, Candy
See if
will
we
want to
can-
post this.
And make sure everybody can see the camera. That means the camera can see you. Okay?
Let's see if I can hit this big old round white button. It's an awful lot of, whoops, but wait, let me see. That out of the way. I think I'll be able to get everybody in here. Yeah, you're perfect. You know, I think that's gonna work. Seems like it is. Okay, we'll do one more for good measure. All right.
Okay.
You know.
I think it's.
Okay, I don't know.
Why
Let
don't,
me
why
see,
don't
let
you
me
check
see.
it and
Let
see
me
if
see,
they
let me
look
see.
like they're actual pictures and not
I don't think it's good. It got everybody, and we want really the square
Okay.
for Instagram.
Yeah,
That's
she
what
knows.
Candy's doing.
She
so-
knows. All right, here we go.
good?
Thank you.
Where's the bag?
I think. Do you like it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Who has the bag?
Oh, was it? Oh,
There,
oh.
there it is. There's the bag.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Don't be
Heard
sorry.
it?
Here it is. I see it. Okay. For Liberation is co-created bag. You want to be able to give it to the person. You want to come grab the bag?
It's out.
Okay. All right. And if you have one already, then I'd like to pass it on to someone who has it. Okay? All right. Here we go. Last four numbers. 8790. 8790.
Oddly enough, nobody seems to have.
It sounds.
How can that be?
8790, like the last four
Yeah.
digits?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's
All right. New book bag. All right. Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you all very much.
Yeah.
And if you,
Might as well.
whatever.
Throw 'em all.
Don't leave on the floor here. And shall I sign books up here, Eric?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
That would be fine. All the books are there, so you can go ahead and get them signed. And then
If anybody doesn't have a book already and would like me to sign it.
just go ahead.
Yeah.
Get it signed. And then bring it to me. The books are there. Yeah, I'll take the card. Cash is great. You got it. Card.
I missed the lunch, so I would love for you to sign my copy, but then I'm gonna get